listen. As death lies in the heart of beauty, so this moment must pass.
On April 19, 1993, 80 Branch Davidians, 56 adults and 24 children, died by fire, explosion, and gunshot at Mount Carmel, Texas. Since that day, there has been controversy about the government's role in the destruction of Mount Carmel and the deaths of the Davidians. Did the Davidians shoot and immolate themselves in an act of mass suicide, as the government claims? Or did agents of the federal government shoot automatic weapons into the back of the burning building, preventing escape and killing many Davidians? The question of gunfire is central to this controversy. These allegations arise from a videotape made by the FBI on April 19th. After examining FLIR tapes, forward-looking infrared, shot by the government on April 19th, several independent experts concluded that flashes seen at the back of Mount Carmel were muzzle flashes from automatic weapons. The government denies that there were armed agents on the ground and insists that what the experts see as muzzle flashes are instead reflections caused by sunlight on rubble, what the government now calls glint. Government experts say they are 100% certain that the following is true about the Waco FLIR images. There are no shooters visible. The alleged muzzle flash duration is too long to be gunfire. The Waco flashes are glint, emissions or solar reflections off of debris in the building rubble. To determine if the flashes seen on the FLIR tapes could be gunfire, the Office of Special Counsel conducted tests at Fort Hood, Texas. It was the Special Counsel's intention to replicate exactly conditions found at Mount Carmel on April 19, 1993. Same weapons, same ammunition, same uniforms, and insofar as possible, the same climatic and atmospheric conditions. After conducting these tests, Special Counsel John Danforth concluded, with 100% certainty, the FBI did not shoot at the Branch Davidians. We respectfully disagree. We realize that reopening this controversy will trouble many who foresee and fear the consequences to individuals and institutions. If it is ever proven that agents of the government fired at Davidians trying to escape the burning building, and that the government then tried to cover up the willful deaths of men, women, and children, about such a possibility, the Special Counsel has said, "This is a matter of grave concern. Our country was founded on the belief that government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. When 61% of the people believe that the government not only fails to ensure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but also intentionally murders people by fire, the existence of public consent, the very basis of government, is imperiled." Judge Walter Smith, who presided at all the trials related to the tragedy at Mount Carmel, has said, "The plaintiffs assert that the FBI's actions kept a number of Davidians from leaving the compound. If the plaintiffs' allegations are true, due process would be implicated, as such behavior would rise to a level that would shock the conscience. Frightening though it may be to contemplate violence sanctioned by our government against American citizens, we believe that truth is essential to freedom. Democracy depends on the knowledge as well as the consent of the governed. Without knowledge, we cannot choose how we wish to be governed. It is to provide such knowledge that the following investigation is presented. In the fall of 2000, a group of scientists, technicians, observers, and other interested parties conducted several tests at 2 Western locations. Additional knowledge was sought regarding the flash phenomenon at Mount Carmel. These field tests were performed under exacting conditions. The FLIR equipment employed for this research was matched as closely as possible to the FLIR equipment used by the FBI on April 19th. In order to achieve a more detailed perspective of events, the FLIR sensor was mounted on a manned lift crane rather than on a circling aircraft, which on April 19th had been flying at 4,200 feet. This provided a more stable platform from which to make observations, and also permitted the recording of data from a much closer point of view. Great care was taken to set up the equipment properly and prepare the testing area. Data was incorporated from the Special Counsel's Fort Hood tests into the FLIR project parameters. The technical skills of a number of experts was employed, and a considerable number of possible variables were also included. And during the testing period, data was monitored, recorded, and a variety of tests were repeated. The overriding concern was to produce test results that were verifiable and could be replicated, regardless of what the results proved to be. To understand what you will see in the following film, it is important to remember the sequence of events on April 19th. On that day, the FBI began inserting CS gas dissolved in methylene chloride into the building. At the same time, tanks began to demolish the building in order to deliver more gas and drive the Davidians into the open. It has been alleged that at mid-morning during this assault, a gunfight erupted between the Davidians and federal agents who were supporting the tanks at the rear of the building. These allegations arise from a videotape made by the FBI on April 19th. This is not a visible light video. Rather, it is an infrared video shot by a FLIR sensor that shows images of objects that contrast with each other depending on differences in their temperature. Relatively hot objects, such as fire or the exhaust from a tank engine, appear as white on the video. Cooler objects appear dark or black. Objects of an intermediate temperature appear as shades of gray. The first question raised by the Fort Hood tests has to do with the visibility or invisibility of federal agents on the FLIR video shot on April 19th. Still photos shot on the same day show FBI personnel wearing standard military field uniforms called BDUs. Our research shows that since the early 1980s, the United States military has been chemically treating such BDUs in order to make them less visible to infrared sensors. Most of the federal personnel surrounding Mount Carmel on April 19th were wearing these chemically treated uniforms designed to reduce or eliminate an agent's thermal image. As the FLIR project's first test, we set out to determine if such chemically treated uniforms could have rendered federal agents relatively invisible to the FLIR sensor on April 19th. In this video footage shot by the FLIR project team, a field appears empty until a man begins to move. He is wearing a standard military-issue BDU uniform, just like those worn by federal agents on April 19th, and cannot be seen if he does not move. But a visible light video shows just how exposed the man really is. In this FBI FLIR video, shot from an airplane at 4,200 feet above Mount Carmel on April 19th, agents can be observed appearing suddenly and unexpectedly from dark and thermally mottled backgrounds. They appear in vivid contrast when walking on the sun-heated storm shelter roof of the Davidian compound. These arrows locate the points at which agents suddenly appear. This FLIR footage illustrates how completely a mottled thermal background and chemically treated BDUs could conceal agents in the rubble of Mount Carmel. This FLIR imagery shows a person running through the rubble of the collapsed Mount Carmel gym, just as the fire is breaking out in the front and at the back of the compound. It might appear that this is debris blown around in the gym by the wind, except for the fact that the person passing through the field of debris is moving across and against the wind. During the morning of April 19th, a small plane circled Mount Carmel. In the plane, FBI agents were taking 35mm still photographs of events as they unfolded during the course of the day. The FLIR project asked a former CIA image analyst and a scientist currently serving in the photo intelligence community to examine 24 of these photographs. A close examination of the areas of the compound where the flashes are seen in the FLIR footage offered some interesting findings. In this close-up of the courtyard at the back of the building on a collapsed wall, the FLIR project image analyst identified 2 or more persons dressed in dark clothing. There's a bright reflective object on the back of one figure. Additional views of these figures show them moving and changing positions. Because these figures have the correct proportion and scale, and because they cast shadows and have depth, and additionally exhibit independent animation, our image analysts have concluded that the figures are human. The image analysts also reviewed the same still photo images in the context of FLIR imagery made at about the same time at Mount Carmel, as well as FLIR imagery shot later at Fort Hood. Upon reviewing the Fort Hood FLIR recreation imagery, the FLIR project scientists offered the following observation. Why does the Fort Hood FLIR test imagery appear to be so much brighter and lacking in detail than the imagery made at Mount Carmel on April 19th? In addition, why don't the human figures in the Fort Hood FLIR look like the figures seen in the April 19th FBI footage? The answers may be found in the fact that the FLIR project scientists noted several anomalies in the Fort Hood video that strongly suggested that the equipment being used was malfunctioning, distorting the final image of the recreation. It was also noted that the ambient air temperature at Fort Hood the day of the test was 65 degrees. The air temperature at Mount Carmel on April 19th was 20 degrees warmer, 85 degrees Fahrenheit. This temperature difference had an impact on the type of image produced. Additionally, parts of the test area at Fort Hood were watered down the day before and covered with tarps to retain the moisture, changing the contrast of those areas seen by the FLIR sensor the morning of the test. An additional effect of the watering down of the test location would have been to eliminate dust in the area during the testing procedure. There may have been additional changes in the appearance of the Fort Hood shooters. In fact, the Fort Hood personnel are more visible because their surroundings are cool, causing them to stand out against the background. Contrast is further increased by thermal shadows from shooters waiting in place for long periods. As a recreation of events at Mount Carmel on April 19th, the Fort Hood FLIR imagery fell well short of the mark of being a reasonable comparative image. The FLIR project took care to shoot FLIR footage on a day that was 85 degrees. The footage was shot far closer than the 4,200 to 6,200 foot altitude flown by the FBI FLIR aircraft on April 19th. Note that in FLIR images shot by the FLIR project, the figure is virtually invisible until he begins to move. Note also the similarity with FLIR images shot by the FBI on April 19th. After comparing still photos and FLIR footage shot at Mount Carmel with similar imagery produced by the FLIR project, the photo analysts found that there were comparable human figures in both sets of material. Based on these observations, the FLIR project photo analysts concluded that the FBI stills show personnel in the courtyard at the back of Mount Carmel during the time of the flashes seen on the FLIR tape. Corollary FLIR images also confirm that there were agents in the rubble in the courtyard. While some gunfire flashes did appear on the Fort Hood FLIR imagery, they were infrequent and of brief duration. The government contends that flashes on April 19th could not be gunfire because they were seen so often and appeared to be of such long duration. Again, the Fort Hood test was supposed to use the same weapons and ammunition that the FBI used at Mount Carmel on April 19th. As seen on this April 19th image, a certain brand of ammunition was employed by the agents. This ammunition has been found in many FBI photos of the scene at Mount Carmel on April 19th. The cartridges used by the FBI hostage rescue team are manufactured by the Federal Cartridge Company. This was to be the ammunition used at the Fort Hood recreation. Instead, the government used standard military ball ammunition. This ammunition uses a chemical coating on the gunpowder that reduces or eliminates muzzle flash when used in combination with a weapon that has an optimum barrel length. The effect of this combination of gunpowder and barrel length reduces or eliminates muzzle flash and prevents the detection of American troops in a combat situation. The commercial federal ammunition used by the FBI at Mount Carmel was not charged with this flash suppressant powder. Besides ammunition, the weapons used at the Fort Hood test were to have been identical to those used on April 19th. In fact, the weapon used at Fort Hood was a standard M16A2 with an optimum barrel length of 20 inches. The weapons actually used by the FBI on April 19th were short-barreled CAR-16s or M4 carbines with 14.5-inch barrels. In this FBI photo, shot as FBI agents took a Branch Davidian into custody during the fire, we can see a short-barreled weapon. This agent is carrying a 14.5-inch barreled CAR-16 or an M4 carbine. In this FLIR project footage, a standard M16A2 with a 20-inch barrel firing standard ball ammunition is visible. There is very little muzzle flash recorded by the FLIR sensor. However, when using an M4 short-barreled carbine and federal brand ammunition, as carried by the FBI on April 19th, the FLIR registers muzzle flashes that are more prominent and longer in duration. Let's review that comparison again, this time from a closer point of view. First, the M16A2 with the 20-inch barrel firing the standard military ball ammunition. Then the M4 carbine with the 14.5-inch barrel firing federal brand commercial ammunition. In sworn testimony, government experts have stated that gunfire flashes will last no longer than 8 milliseconds. A flash of such short duration is all but imperceptible to the human eye. In video footage, the camera photographs at 30 frames per second. Each frame is made up of 2 interlaced fields. A field lasts 16.66 milliseconds. A frame, therefore, lasts 33.32 milliseconds. The government contends that a gunfire flash will last less than half of one field, or about 8 milliseconds. This image has been slowed to 8%, a mere fraction of its original speed. The government notes, and correctly so, that the flashes on April 19th FLIR footage last anywhere from 1 frame to 4 frames, about 133 milliseconds. For this reason, the government contends the flashes are too long in duration to be gunfire. The following footage shows a field-by-field review of a gunfire flash from a 20-inch barreled M16A2 firing military ball ammunition, illustrating the government's position on flash duration. The muzzle flash here is very fast and is hard to see unless it is slowed down. With a field-by-field review, slow motion confirms that a flash appears in only one field of the FLIR video. Remember, this is a long-barreled weapon firing flash-suppressed ammunition, as was tested by the Special Counsel's office during the Fort Hood recreation. Note that only one field of video shows a muzzle flash. However, when we use the combination of weapon and ammunition actually employed by the FBI on April 19th at Mount Carmel, we discover an entirely different set of results. The following video shows that while the flash is still very brief, the field-by-field assessment clearly shows several fields of continuous flash. Remember, each field is 16.66 milliseconds long, with at least 2 continuous fields showing flash. This means that actual FBI weapons and ammunition produces a muzzle flash more than 4 times longer than the government's claim of 8 milliseconds. Still, despite this finding, flashes that appeared on the April 19th FLIR footage lasted even longer, from 1 frame to as long as 4 frames, or 133 milliseconds. What could have caused these longer flashes? The FLIR project investigators considered several unique circumstances occurring at Mount Carmel on April 19th that could have contributed to longer flashes. Of these, dust seemed the most likely possibility. As the tanks inserted gas and demolished the building, they churned up a lot of dust, particularly during this period from 11:18 a.m. to 12:10 p.m. The wind was blowing at about 30 miles per hour and added to the dusty mix. As the tanks demolished the building, the collapse of the structure added so much more dust that power lines almost became invisible against a horizon clouded by dust. What would gunfire look like in a dusty environment? FLIR project investigators conducted a dust test to see the effect of dust on the size, shape, and duration of a muzzle flash. The test was simple but effective. The investigators threw dust into the air column ahead of the muzzle of an M4 carbine, shooting Federal brand commercial ammunition. The test results were recorded in a number of ways. Visible light video shot on the ground and from the tower, and FLIR video shot from the tower. In addition, still photographs were shot from the ground. The dust test will serve as an appropriate illustration of the effect that small particles in the atmosphere have on the FLIR sensor when imaging muzzle flash. In this context, the observer needs to distinguish between the large pieces of soil here and the fine or small particles in the dust column seen here. The fine dust particles seen in the test images are very similar to the fine dust seen in the atmosphere around Mount Carmel on April the 19th. The observer should note the large particles do not interact with the muzzle flash as seen in this FLIR project test footage. The large particulate material is dark gray or cool as the FLIR sensor sees it. The fine dust particles compose the material that the heat from the muzzle flash interacts with, as is indicated in this FLIR image. Note in this sequence of video fields the interaction of heat from the muzzle flash and the fine dust particulate creates an amplification of the muzzle flash, both in terms of size and duration. It is the fine dust seen at Mount Carmel on the 19th that provides the amplification of the flashes seen at the back of the compound. For detailed analysis, a 3-round burst fired through the cloud of dust was chosen. What follows is such a 3-round burst in real time, then at 8% slow motion. And then a field-by-field review of a 3-round burst, which covered 11 fields of continuous video footage. Here again is the 3-round burst in real time. As a comparison, look at a burst of flash in the April 19th FBI FLIR footage. Look for the flash ahead and to the left of the tank. Note that there is no reflective heat source, such as the tank engine, in close proximity to the flash. Also note that the rubble field is approximately 60 to 70 feet to the right of the flash signature. Because of their long duration, the government contends that these flashes are the result of nearby reflected heat emissions, or specular reflection called glint. Glint tests conducted by the FLIR project, along with the physics of sun reflection, show that the FBI's glint explanation for these flashes is suspect. Reflections from the sun simply cannot produce the effects that the government claims. For example, when sunlight strikes an object like window glass, it makes a long-duration round flash. Tests show that such reflections take the shape of cones and are the same diameter at similar distances. The size and shape of the glass doesn't matter. A FLIR sensor can't record a sun reflection unless it flies directly through a cone. Estimated flight parameters for the FBI FLIR plane on April 19th result in very small cone diameters. The FBI aircraft would have had to cross a precise array of cones to record strobe-like flashes from Mount Carmel. But that's impossible. Random reflections from glass on uneven ground can't aim themselves at an aircraft. It's clear that the Mount Carmel flashes were not caused by sun reflections off of shards of window glass or any other flat surface. But what about other reflective materials? The Fort Hood recreation showed that most debris won't generate long, thin infrared signatures when using vintage 1993 FLIR technology. Aluminum foil and glass fragments won't either. Nor will hubcaps and cans or spherical objects. And as we've seen, window glass can't. FLIR project tests confirmed these negative Fort Hood results. For example, a rocking, wavy aluminum target did not generate long, thin infrared signatures. Moving, shiny shed roofing material produced only short, segmented infrared signatures. However, the Fort Hood recreation did show that curved surfaces can generate long, thin flashes. FLIR project tests confirmed this finding. A rolled aluminum target created long flashes. When tilted and rotated, it produced signatures roughly like those generated by the Fort Hood targets. However, the FBI's claim that the Mount Carmel flashes were caused by such material creates a problem for the government. Any object large enough to create such flashes could also be seen in visible light video and still photography. The FLIR project photo analyst searched in vain for such objects in the aerial photography from April 19th. In addition, FLIR researchers reviewed documentation prepared by the Office of Special Counsel for Photographic Evidence and consulted notes from a discussion about construction at Mount Carmel prior to April 19th. No evidence was found of any large, smooth object that could have produced the flash signatures seen on the FLIR video. It should also be noted that many of the 1993 flashes came from areas traversed by armored vehicles. Experiments using point source light on crushed aluminum show that, as expected, flattened metal surfaces cannot generate lenticular reflections. The FLIR project tests discredit the government's sun reflection theory. Using the glint test imagery, the images were scaled down to approximate what they would have looked like from the point of view of the FBI aircraft on April 19th. As can be observed, the glint signal is very weak, almost imperceptible, when compared to the existent flash in the FBI image. To generate a glint flash of comparative size and shape, the aluminum cylinder required would have to have been substantially larger in diameter than a 55-gallon drum. There were no such objects at Mount Carmel on the 19th of April, 1993. Gunfire remains the best explanation for the flashes that appear on the 1993 FLIR video. Identifying the nature of the flashes seen in the Waco FLIR is the key to answering the darkest questions about what happened at Mount Carmel. The FLIR project tests provide direct, simple answers to the question: why were the flashes of such long duration? Using scale drawings of the armored vehicles used by the FBI, the FLIR test footage was scaled down and inserted into the FLIR footage shot by the FBI on April 19th. Here is a side-by-side comparison of FLIR project test footage with FLIR footage shot on April 19th. For clarity, the blue arrow points at FLIR project test footage. The red arrow points to an image that can only be muzzle flashes, short bursts from automatic weapons. With a high degree of certainty, the FLIR project tests confirm that flashes recorded by FLIR video on April 19th at Mount Carmel are gunfire.
Listen. Listen. As death lies in the heart of beauty, so this moment must pass. Feel the power. Listen. Listen. Let it move you.